Hey everyone, welcome back to my garage. Today I'm going to be converting my Shopsmith Mark V from a Model 500 to a Model 510. The 510 upgrade gives you a bigger, beefier table, a bigger extension table, two floating tables, tubes to support all of that, a better blade guard with better dust collection, a 12-inch steel sanding disc, and an upgraded fence and miter gauge. The conversion is pretty straightforward. The first thing to do is remove the old tables. Prop up your weigh tubes, then remove the tie bar. Slide off your power plant and carriage, and you're halfway done. Slide on the new carriage, put your power plant back on, and reinstall your tie bar. Now you can install your new table, extension table, dust collector, and blade guard, and you've got a 510. The 510 upgrade gives you a lot more workspace, which is something I was really looking forward to on this machine. It feels much sturdier and safer now as well. With all these new parts and pieces, there's a lot of setup that needs to be done. There are a bunch of adjustments to be made to ensure straight, quality cuts, but there is one adjustment that needs to be done to ensure safe cuts with the table saw. That's the alignment of the blade to the blade guard. The blade guard is there to prevent kickback and keep all your digits where they belong. Don't mess with kickback. There are a lot of videos out there that demonstrate just how dangerous this can be, and I recommend searching for them and checking them out. Fortunately, this is also the easiest adjustment to make. The first thing you want to do is unplug the machine. Move your carriage out of the way and install the lower blade guard as far left as it will go, then lock it down. Now install your blade. Make sure the arbor seats up against the stop collar. Now install your upper blade guard and riving knife. The blade and riving knife should be perfectly aligned. If they're not, this can cause your workpiece to jam against the riving knife at the end of a cut, or skew your piece on the way out, giving you an inaccurate cut. To fix this, loosen the blade and stop collar, move your blade left or right until it's perfectly in line with the riving knife, and lock it down. Then bring your stop collar up to the arbor and lock it down. Now your blade will be perfectly aligned every time you install it. It's easy to check this alignment each time you get ready to use the table saw. It only takes about 2 seconds, and it's worth it to ensure safety and quality. The next adjustments to make are for the 45 and 90 degree stops on the table. Loosen and tilt the adjustment on the table, then use a square set at 90 degrees to the blade and lock it down. Then use a wrench to adjust the stop bolts to the right place to ensure you're at 90 degrees every time you have to adjust the table. The 45-degree adjustment is done the same way, but using a combination square with the ruler removed. Loosen the table lock and swing the table to 45 degrees to the blade, then lock it down. Again, you want to adjust the stop bolts to ensure that the table stops at 45 degrees each time you want to make that angle change. Adjustment to make is to ensure the miter slot and blade are aligned. I used a combination square and set it in the miter slot, then adjusted the ruler out until it just skimmed the front edge of the blade and locked it down. Slide the square to the back of the blade and ensure that there is no gap or that the ruler isn't pushing the blade away. The table is bolted to a thing called the trunnion with 4 bolts. If you need to adjust it, loosen the bolts, tweak the table, then lock them back down. I like to keep the bolts slightly tight, then smack it with the palm of my hand until the alignment is right, then lock them all down. Double check your alignment. Accurate cuts depend on the blade and miter slot being parallel. The next thing to adjust is the miter gauge. I use a square set against the blade, then bring the gauge up to the square. Get the alignment right, then lock it down. You can tweak the adjustment screw to ensure it stops at the right angle each time you make the angle change. Remember, you need to make an adjustment for plus 45 degrees, 90 degrees, and minus 45 degrees on the miter gauge. Now I'm going to adjust the fence. The next adjustment is for the out V-clamp. This should be adjusted so that when it is released, it should pivot up and away from the table without touching the bar. To adjust it, you just tighten or loosen the coupling nut on the back of the fence until the clamp just misses the bar. The first thing to adjust is the fence rest. That's the little nubbin at the back that rests on the tubes. You want this to be as flat against the tubes as possible. There are 2 screws that you can loosen just enough to move it. Lock down the front and back of the fence to center the rest, then remove it gently and lock down the screws. The most finicky adjustment on the whole Shopsmith is setting the fence parallel to the miter slot. To do this, put your miter gauge in the slot and lock down the fence front and back. Use a ruler against the miter gauge to check the distance between the front and back of the fence in relation to the miter gauge. If it needs to be adjusted, there are 2 screws to loosen on the front of the miter gauge on the bottom. I picked up a trick from Scott at My Growth Rings on YouTube. He suggests only loosening the screw you can access from the bottom with the fence installed. It's worked well for me so far, so I recommend that method. Once you have the fence aligned, tighten the screw and you're good to go. The next adjustment is to ensure the table is square to the quill when you're in drill press mode. To do this, I installed the longest drill bit I have, then adjusted the table angle and stop bolts the same way as the 45 and 90 degree stops in table saw mode. Make sure you check for square in 2 places 90 degrees apart. The last adjustment we need to make is to account for the way tube twist. Install your extension table to the left of the headstock, level with your table on the front end. Then use a straight edge of some kind to check the front and back of the extension table. If you need to adjust, there's a set screw on the back of the headrest. Adjust this up or down to get your extension table lined up front to back with your table. The last adjustment I'm going to make is to get the lathe ready to run. You have to have your power plant and tailstock aligned properly to ensure quality turnings. To do this, remove your tables and install your tailstock. Move your carriage all the way to the right, then bring your power plant up to the carriage. Install your cup center in the tailstock and your drive center in the quill. Extend your quill until the drive and cup centers are nearly touching and lock it in place. The first adjustment is for the horizontal axis. Loosen the set screw in the tailstock and rotate the eccentric mount until the points on the centers are lined up when you're looking straight down at them, then lock your set screw in place. To adjust the vertical axis, loosen the stop collars in the lock sleeve. Move the tailstock up or down until the points on the centers are lined up when you're looking directly at them, then lock the tailstock in place. Now bring your stop collars down until they're touching the base and lock them down. Now your tailstock will always be in alignment when you're ready to do some turning. 510 upgrade is a huge improvement to this machine. I painted the upgrade parts to match the old greeny paint scheme, and I think it looks awesome this way. If you're looking into one of these machines, you'll find a lot of people who don't like it because it isn't as good as their standalone versions. I agree with that. This machine isn't going to be an upgrade to your SawStop or Jet tools. That being said, it is more than capable of doing just about anything those tools can, but it takes up a much smaller footprint. For someone like me, that's exactly what I need. I don't have the space for all those tools, so having something compact like this is a huge deal. Plus, there are some quirks and tricks that this machine can do that others can't. I'm loving this machine, and I love how it turned out. Stay tuned for my last video in the restoration series where I get the joiner back on its feet. Thanks for watching.